Ekiti State. Mr. President, I also want to add my voice in commending our colleagues who worked to put the legislative agenda together. And in doing that, Mr. President, let me also recall for the records your own individual effort, even as an aspirant wanting to be president of the Senate, when you invited all the senators elect in May of this year, a few weeks before our inauguration, and you unfolded your own legislative agenda. And I have no doubt, as a man with a sense of history, that the legislative agenda that you proposed must also have formed a chunk of what our committee, ad hoc committee on legislative agenda, has been able to work on. So I also commend you for your vision, as I commend the legislative agenda committee that had codified everything for our own discussion. Mr. President, a lot of the various aspects have been discussed, and I don't intend to repeat any one of such. But let me emphasize, first, on the need for capacity building. This cannot be overemphasized. In the three aspects that need to be specifically attended to: building the capacity of elected legislators, building the capacity of those who constitute the bureaucracy of the National Assembly, and of course, building the capacity of those young men and women that elected legislators always bring with them to the National Assembly as legislative aides. Whatever it would take, I would emphasize that this is an area that is very critical and that requires all the attention. And part of what I will suggest is that the leadership of the National Assembly, under your chairmanship, Mr. President, will also look beyond what the National Assembly itself can afford to invest in building the capacity of the legislators and the bureaucracy and their legislative aides, to see to the possibility of also working with relevant development partners, and especially civil society organizations, to see the extent to which we can also leverage on what they are willing to contribute in that capacity, in that regard. Mr. President, I also believe that there is a need for us to be able to achieve the ambition spelled out in the legislative agenda as to strengthening our law-making capacity. There is a need to amend both sections 58 and 59 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended. Section 58 has to do with the mode of presentation and management of our bills, while Section 59 has to do with assent to such bills. There is a need to be more specific as to timing and mode, and I believe this is something that also requires the attention of the Ninth Assembly. Mr. President, I also want to speak to an issue raised on page 28 of the legislative agenda, which has to do with the need to strengthen the National Assembly Budget and Research Office. There is no doubting the fact that if something is not done urgently in this regard, the Nigerian National Assembly will get left behind by the international community and by parliamentary bodies all over the world. The essence of the National Assembly Budget and Research Office is to be able to make timeous assessment of situations and be able to also help every legislator to discharge their responsibilities. It is where we are supposed to have a body of professionals from different backgrounds who would help us to do a lot of the things that we do and even say on the floor of this Senate. I knew that the 7th Assembly worked hard on this. The 8th Assembly consolidated on this. Whatever has to be done, Mr. President, the 9th Assembly has to see to the completion of this dream, including the presidential assent. Again, Mr. President, I want to speak on the need for us, as spelled out also on page 29 of this legislative agenda, to work very consciously on the need to improve relationship within the three arms of government. And of course, we're in a position to do that. Already, it is happening. And I believe our country is the better for it. Part of the reason today we can be talking about an MTF already presented and a budget possibly going to be laid within the next few weeks is because of the new understanding. And there's a need to ensure that both between the executive and the judicial arms, as well as between us and each of the two other arms of government, that this relationship and this new understanding is, of course, strengthened. We will do our job as a parliament, we will do what we have to do, but of course it will go beyond the level of mere grandstanding. I'm confident, I'm happy with the caliber, status, and consciousness of distinguished senators in the 9th Assembly. And I have no doubt that gone are the days of sheer grandstanding. So whatever we need to do is what we will do to ensure that the independence of the Senate, the independence of the legislative arm is not compromised. But this should not stop us from ensuring that there is stability through, very cordial relationship with the other arms of government. Mr. President, I also want to speak on the need for us to be much more conscious on the aspects of our law that are inhibiting against economic progress in this country. Without fear or favor, every committee of this Senate must look into the relevant areas of the law that they feel will enhance progress in such sectors and bring such up. In the area of petroleum, or in the petroleum industry, for instance, this country has continued to bleed. I will cite just one example. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, Section 16 of the Deep Offshore Production Sharing Contract Act provides that anytime our crude oil sells for beyond $20, the difference will be shared with the federal government on a percentage basis. I know as a fact, Mr. President, that as we speak, over $20 billion is outstanding because of the refusal of oil companies to honor this just one provision of our law. $20 billion is 7 trillion naira, Mr. President. This can almost fund our annual budget for a whole year. This is just for reasons of non-compliance with one provision of our law. So when it comes to amending such laws, Mr. President, the 9th Assembly, this Senate, should waste no time. And there are several of such. And I believe this is one of the areas where we have a lot to do, and most urgently. I know a lot of people will speak, Mr. President.
Yeah, and you can round up.
that it is good that we have this legislative agenda, but we need to remind ourselves again that what is most important is the political will. Again, I reiterate that philosophers have interpreted the world. What is left is to change it. And being here is a platform for each and every one of us to be able to seek to change, the destiny of this country through legislative intervention by way of effectively and religiously, implementing this legislative agenda, so that when we are back here during our valedictory session at the end of this tenure, we'll be able to also talk or speak to this legislative agenda and say we have done well with ourselves and with this nation. I thank you, Mr. President.
Deputy Leader.